water, I always forget to drink. Okay, part 3. Too much to speak about in too little time. So, we built the foundation on Hashem's presence, Hashem's connection to us by bringing us into reality from nothing every split second. And last week, I said that we're going to speak about one of the 7 foundational aspects that need to be present for a person to feel comforted, have peace of mind, and stability in the hands or in the relationship of another. And we spoke about love and how HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the source of all love, and that love ultimately is built upon one person's undying commitment to do what's best for another. So in the car ride home, my friend Jack Shama said, "I'm sure you're going to teach us the other 6. And I said, "No, actually, I didn't think I had enough time." But in thinking about it tonight, I said, let me try to teach the other 6. And hopefully leave enough time for what I really wanted to speak about. So it turns out that love is not enough. My mother loved me a lot, but I still worried about a lot of things. And the reason why love is not enough is that love provides intention. When a person loves you, they intend to do good for you. However, they may not be able to. If I get pulled over by a speeding ticket and my mother's in the seat next to me and she loves me, she feels terrible for me, but quite frankly, there's nothing she can do about it. So the second thing the Chavat HaLevavos tells us is that because of what we laid as a foundation, that everything is a manifestation of Hashem, obviously, everything transpires in this world with Hashem's direction, with Hashem's permission. In other words, the energy of whatever's happening is being provided by Hashem, so obviously, He controls it. That doesn't mean that we don't have free will, because we do. However, when one person's free will is going to impact the life of another, that cannot take place, tells us many of the commentaries, without HaKadosh Baruch Hu's exact direction. Paro did not enslave the Jews. HaKadosh Baruch Hu enslaved the Jews using Paro as a shliach, as a messenger. Paro gets punished because he made the free will choice. But Hashem already told Abraham that we're going to be enslaved. So when we say Ein Od Milvado, we mean that everything that influences us is connected to the will of Hashem. The third thing is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is constantly in the know of what's going on in our lives. If I get pulled over by a state trooper, even if my mother could help me, but she's not there, she doesn't know about it, there's nothing she can do about it. The Tanya tells us in the beginning that there was a belief that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a world and left it alone in its own devices. And sometimes when we feel alone, we think that we have to tell Hashem what's going on. We think that prayer means we make Hashem aware of our problems. We fill Him in on what's right and wrong in our lives. HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows everything that's going on with you. He even knows it before it's going to happen. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is constantly thinking about us. Even when we ourselves are not focused on our own lives because we're so distracted by the trivialities of life, and we sometimes disconnect from what's really important. Maybe it's our children, maybe it's our spouses, maybe it's our Torah study, maybe it's our prayer, maybe it's building a war chest for the next world because we're so fixated on wielding a war chest in this world. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu is watching this and thinking about us and saying, wow, how long do I let this go on? It's like, your child has a homework assignment and the hours are going by and he has to go to sleep and he's still playing with his little toys, so you wake him up. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is constantly thinking about us as our third foundation. The fourth, which we touched upon last week, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what's good for us, far more than we know what's good for us. If you kept a diary of your life and you tracked things that you wanted desperately, only to find out years and decades later what a mistake it would have been had you got that thing. But at the time, you were broken, you were devastated, or vice versa. You received something which you felt, wow, I'm so lucky, I'm so excited, only to find out years later that this was the beginning of a huge problem. I hate to use a mashal, but there were families that achieved great wealth. And at the time, it seemed like, what an unbelievable bracha. And perhaps it was. But several generations later, unfortunately, we find these families where sometimes there are no Jewish descendants even left. What do we know? Nothing. This is the hardest part about being human. We as humans like to plan. We like to analyze. We like direction. We like long-term goals. We think we actually have a clue. When my grandparents, my mother's parents, found themselves in a city which was split down the middle between the Russians and the Germans, Yimach Shemam, my grandfather wanted to stay on the side of the Germans. My grandmother Miriam was a brilliant woman. She had incredible intuition. And she told my grandfather, we're going to the side of the Russians. There was literally an hour to make this decision. And she went over to the side of the Russians illegally, and they were immediately arrested. And as they were on the train being deported to Siberia, my grandfather turned to my grandmother and said, I am sure that whatever it was for the good. There was nothing that looked good at that moment. They were going to Siberia, where very few people survived. Yet, as it turned out, within days, the rest of that city was taken by the Germans, and everybody ended up in Auschwitz. My mother, her family, and my grandparents survived the war. Cold, but they survived the war in Siberia. Not even knowing until after the war what happened. There are thousands of such stories, but you don't have to go to the Holocaust. There are thousands of such stories in our lives where what we thought was the greatest thing turned out to be the opposite, and what we thought was the greatest tragedy. I had a friend, I will never forget this. He was not religious. I worked with him for a number of years. Always spoke to him about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I always spoke to him about his purpose on this world. He came to see me one day, completely broken. And he says to me, your God, your good God, he took away my job. He had me fired for no good reason. He had gotten an amazing job with a technology company, and he was fired. And he wasn't a young man, he was in his 60s at the time, and the hope of finding another job was quite bleak. And I said to him, Harry, all I can tell you is everything Hashem does is for the good. He said, I can't imagine that in this case that's true. 2 weeks later, his entire firm perished in the Twin Towers. He was on the 89th floor of Tower 1. It only took 2 weeks for him to see that HaKadosh Baruch Hu saved his life. When we are distraught, anxious, it's because we are evaluating everything that happens to us with this myopic, small-minded, short-term view of life. And we only see this world. We have no idea what ultimately is ahead of us. Whatever pain, whatever suffering, whatever tragedies that befall us, we only have one measuring tool, the measuring tool of this world. But this world is finite. It's over before we blink. There's eternity beyond this for each of us. And we have no idea whether what's good on this world is going to be good on the next world, or vice versa. We must trust that HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what's best for us. So let's go back. HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us. He's constantly thinking about us. Everything that takes place in this world happens with His permission and direction. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows what's good for us. Number 6, I'm sorry. Hashem loves us was number 1. The Horowitz Levavos tells us it's an incredible thing if you do this. And when we get to the second part of the class, we'll teach you how to do it a little bit better. The Horowitz Levavos tells a person to think back. Of course, you cannot think back, but you can imagine the moment that you were conceived. We were all conceived as 2 cells forming together, would split into 8, 16, 32, and we multiplied and multiplied, and then our limbs began to form, one after another. Our brain, our heart, our legs, our eyes, our mouth, everything that we have at one point was given to us in a miraculous way before we had any control over who we are and what we are going to do with our lives. All this took place because the HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it happen, and we had nothing to do with it. Absolutely nothing. And then we were born in a miraculous way. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave our parents this undying love for us, to diaper us and feed us and heal us when we were sick. And we had no idea this was going on. We were 6 months old, a year old, 2 years old, 4 years old. We didn't even have an awareness of self. And we were miraculously being nourished and sustained on this world because that is the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu created it. And then one day we became aware of ourselves. And we started feeling independent. We started feeling like you have some control over your situation. Like you somehow determine outcomes. And as we get older and we become teenagers, we know even more. And then we get more and more into this whole belief system. But what happened? How did you get here? How did you form your hands and legs and brain and eyes and all that? You can't take any credit for that. The Horowitz Levavos tells us, if you are going to feel secure in the hands of another, You have to have a track record with them. They have to have been there for you. Consistency. Right? Somebody comes around in your latter years of life. It's not the same as your childhood friend. It's not the same as a parent. It's not the same as the person that was there for you consistently from the time that you could remember. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu has been there for us from the moment of conception. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu has created, nourished, sustained you for who you are. And at some point, we disconnect from that. And the Chabad Levavos tells us, if a person just meditates, stops, goes back into his mother's womb, and says, wow, what's happening here? How is all this coming to fruition? There's a God that's making this happen. He's been there from the very beginning, even before I was there. And now I feel alone. How could that be? You were never more alone in your life as you were inside your mother's womb. Yet somehow you made it out. With all your faculties. Who was there for you at that moment? Even your mother wasn't there for you. Only Hashem. There's one more very important one. People believe, rightfully so to some degree, that we have to earn whatever it is we're asking for from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We know that the system of Judaism in the world is built on schar va'onesh. We get punished for avirot, we get schar for mitzvot, and we start to believe that perhaps we deserve whatever's happening to us. I deserve it. I don't blame Hashem. I don't think Hashem loves me right now. I don't blame Him. I don't love myself all that much. I know that other people are disappointed in me. So I'm sure HaKadosh Baruch Hu is disappointed in me also. And maybe this idea of Hashem loving us and Hashem taking care of us and watching us is all dependent on us behaving. And right now I'm not behaving. I'm not doing what I should. And therefore, I have a reason to be anxious and nervous and depressed and so on and so forth. Tells us the Chabad Levavot that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's love for us is so unconditional that He bestows good on those that deserve and those that do not deserve. I heard a very profound idea on Shabbat. It's unbelievable. We have the story in the Torah where Abraham wakes up in the morning and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm going to turn over Sodom, kill all these people. How can I not tell Abraham? Abraham is going to be the father of nations. So, we all know what happens in the Parsha. Abraham says, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Maybe there's 50 holy people there. Hashem says, sorry. Maybe there's 45. 40. Right? And they go down to 10. And they walk away. And Hashem sends the angels to destroy Sodom. Now we find a profound story. Lot is running away from Sodom. Yeah? And he doesn't have where to run. So he says to the angels, he says, there's this little city over there called Mitzar. Mitzar was one of the cities slated for demolition, as we say. Can I please run there so I can save myself? Now, the answer is no. It's supposed to be turned over. It's one of the cities. It's one of the suburbs of Sodom. But what happens? He saves the city of Mitzrayim. So Abraham could not save a single city, but Lot turns and says, could you do me a favor? Could you save Mitzrayim? And they go, okay. I don't understand the story. Doesn't make any sense. Listen to this profound idea. What did Abraham do? He had a negotiation with Hashem. He knew that if there aren't 10 righteous people, Sodom cannot be saved. Al pi din, according to the law, there it is. 10 people must be there. And that's the way he approached his tefillah. There are reasons why he did that, which are not pertinent to this discussion. And therefore, didn't add up. He came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and said, if Sodom deserves to be turned over, meaning that there aren't 10 people, by all means do it. But perhaps, according to the law, they don't deserve to be. And he walked away. And they were turned over. Listen to what Lot says. Hine na matzasi avdecha chen be'enecha. It seems that I have found chen, favor. We'll fixate on that word for a second. Betagdel chazdecha shasita imadi lachyot es nafshi. You have done a great chesed for me. You've saved me. I'm asking you for one more favor. You did me one favor, do another. I'd like to run there. Listen to the words over here. I found chen, you did chesed. And they answer him, yes, for this too we will bestow chen and chesed upon you. Lot took a completely different approach. Lot said, I don't know why I got saved, probably in the skut of Abraham, but you obviously are being kind and generous to me, so I'm going to push it a little further and I'm going to ask you to save a whole city so I have where to run. Oh, you're coming for a matnas chinam. The word chinam and the word chen had the same letter, right? Chen. You want chinam? Okay, no problem. No problem. That tefillah, the one who came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and said, I am completely undeserving, extend your kindness to me a little bit further, he received what he asked for. It's such a ridiculous thing when a person thinks that he deserves or doesn't deserve. We deserve nothing. You know that little sign in the city on the billboard that shows the deficit? You know that little chart? I haven't been to the city in a while, but I can't even imagine what it looks like. It's probably going so fast now that you can't even watch it.
They have to get a bigger sign.
They have to get a bigger sign, yeah, because they added some more decimals. That's us. That's us. We do something for somebody, we do a little act of chesed, and we feel well good about ourselves. And then when we pray to Hashem, we think, oh, I've got some currency over here. It's insane. It really is. Yet, Hashem keeps giving us more and more and more. Health and nachat and parnasah. And we think that there's some kind of a give and take. Tells us the Chavat al-Vavos, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you when you deserve and when you don't deserve. Therefore, never should you think that you are in the right for feeling disconnected and somehow that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is running out of patience with you. If that spurs you to do more, kol hakavod. But if that spurs you to anxiety and depression and fear and disconnection, as Rabbi Nachman says, where there's depression and darkness, we are concealed even more from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no darker place on this world than when a person goes inside of themselves, into the cellar of depression and hopelessness. It's very difficult to get out of there. So there's going to be a sheet on the table which you can take that just summarizes the 7. Now I want to finish with something else. Those of you who have my book, there's a couple of chapters on this, but I just want to summarize it. So we have information. We can start to connect to the idea of Ein Sof, everything being an emanation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu loving us, being in control, knowing, consistent, all of these things. The problem is they're all ideas. They're all information. And most of what ails us is coming from the heart. It's coming from the emotion. A person has 2 main faculties. According to the Tanya in chapter 9, the neshama resides in 2 places. And through those 2 places, it influences our body. In the moach and in one ventricle of the heart. Through the blood, through the nervous system, through the thinking faculty, the neshama introduces his influence. The Tanya tells us that in the other ventricle of the heart is something called the nefesh habahami, the living soul force, which is very, very much rooted in this world. It's the counterpart to the neshama. It's that which pulls us down. When we are trapped in feelings of hopelessness, what's happening is our nefesh habahami is spilling over into our heart and influencing us. It affects your stomach, your heart rate. Everything about you physically is being influenced. The mind and the heart are very much disconnected. And we can see this throughout our lives. We know something is right, yet we find ourselves doing the opposite. We know there's really nothing to worry about, yet we have a pit in our stomach. It happens to me constantly. I know that Hashem runs the world, and I believe that Hashem runs the world. But why is anybody telling that to my stomach? Why is my chest tight? Why are my hands sweating? Why am I shaking? And I could say it over and over. But what's wrong with you? Hashem runs the world. And somebody else tells you, Gamzu Tava, what's the matter with you? And now on top of your pain and anxiety, you have guilt on top of that. And you think, what's wrong with me? And I remember once going to my rabbi and telling him, I learned Shara B'tachon 10 times. I could literally recite chapters and chapters in my sleep. I knew the 7 attributes. If you woke me up at 4 in the morning, quick, Naftali, what are the 7 attributes? So why am I feeling this way? And what do I do about it? And my rabbi told me, when you figure it out, come back and teach me. Exactly what he said. The heart and the mind need each other desperately. It's like a husband and wife that don't communicate. But both of them are utterly miserable. They might even be sleeping in the same bedroom, but they're not talking to each other. Or if they're talking, it's not the kind of communication that's conducive to a happy marriage. But they need each other. They need each other because the heart needs emotion. The brain needs emotion and the heart needs information. The heart needs to know right from wrong. And the brain needs you to feel what it is you're doing. They don't speak to each other because they speak completely different languages. The brain processes words, data, numbers, cold, dry information. The heart has absolutely no use for that. You can give the heart a spreadsheet with 60 columns of reasons why it has nothing to worry about, and it won't make a dent. I know people that have tried this. They document all the reasons why they shouldn't worry about something, but they still find themselves stuck over here. And the reason is that the heart doesn't use information. It uses emotion. It speaks the language of emotion. Words, facts, that's for the brain. There's only one language that they both speak. There's only one language that was given to us to help them communicate. It's a language that we have lost, we being adults. It's a language that children spend their days delving in. You ever see a child sitting on the floor playing? My son can play for 10 hours straight. It literally, if we don't put food in his mouth, he would starve playing with his Playmobiles. He goes into a world of imagination, a world of his own making. Right? And they're sitting there on the floor, and you're looking at them, and they're completely someplace else. The power of imagination is unbelievable. Now, we use it when you watch something that's captivating, right? It's captivating. What's it captivating? It's captivating your heart. It's pulling you in. When you read a book, a really good book, after a few minutes, you forget you're actually reading words on a page, don't you? Sometimes I stop and remind myself, these are just words on a page. But the author has transported you someplace. And you're in Spain during the Inquisition, and there's an hors d'oeuvre going to happen. And the crowds are cheering, and they're bringing the rabbi to the where they're going to burn him at the stake. And he's wearing a hood. And you're imagining all this happening. It never happened. The book is completely fictitious. But yet you have created all of these images because that's what the page is doing to you. And it's captivating both your brain. Your brain is not stopping and thinking, I better put this book down because I have an appointment in 15 minutes. And your heart is not pulling you someplace else. They're both on the page. Because the power of imagery has captivated both of them. Because it's a common language for both. The Michtam Eliyahu of Leo Dessler quotes Rav Simcha Zisel, who is known as the Alter of Kelm, who says that the reason why our forefathers achieved the greatness that they did is that they mastered the power of imagery. That they had a very powerful imagination. This, he says, is why the Torah is full of imagery. The Torah doesn't just say God comes down to Sinai and gives us the Torah day, call it a day. The Torah is full of imagery, what the mountain looked like, and the sound of the thunder, and the clouds, and where Moshe stood. Why? Because the Torah is telling us to ingrain in your heart what it meant to stood at Sinai. You have to close your eyes and be able to imagine it. It's not just words on the page. And you look at the Torah, it's full of imagery. If we take the power of imagery and we use it to take information that we know is beneficial, HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves me. Those are words. They're just words. Doesn't make me feel better. But close your eyes and play a movie of all the wonderful things things that you have in your life right now. Play a moving picture of everything that you can remember from the time that you began your memories. All the goodness and bounty that you've had in your life. And play that image in your mind's eye. And you will watch your stomach completely transform. You will watch your chest free up. Because you will now have the language of both. You need your brain to create positive imagery. Otherwise, your heart will create negative imagery. I had a couple that came to me a few months ago. They had a weekend that they needed to go to. And the wife is prone to panic attacks. And she wouldn't go. She refused to go. She made up this excuse and that excuse and this excuse and that excuse. And she wouldn't tell her husband why she wouldn't go, but she wasn't going to go. And she said, go without me. And he wasn't going to go without her. So they came to my house. So I asked her to close her eyes. And I asked her to tell me exactly what she sees happening at this weekend. Right? And she started describing Friday night dinner. She can describe the tables and the chairs and the candle lighting and the chalot on the table and the gefilte fish with the little carrot on top and everything, the napkins and everything is wonderful. And she's describing this. So it never happened. But in her mind's eye, this is what happens. And then all of a sudden, the door flies open and the gunman comes in with a machine gun and begins shooting. And blood and carnage is all over the room. Yeah. That's why she didn't want to go. That's exactly why she didn't want to go. It's amazing that the Satan, he knows how powerful imagery is. And in fact, he uses it against us all the time. When we do an Aveirah, whatever it is, we always envision it before. We always have the pleasure. In fact, that's why the Aveirah itself, the Tanya says, Hirurei Aveirah, Kashim Aveirah, the thoughts of the Aveirah are worse than the Aveirah itself. Because it's never as good as when you imagine it's going to be. And the Satan knows that if he can take, in the words of the Altar of Kelm, if he could take the weapon that you're supposed to use against him and turn it against you, he won the war. So we have forgotten the language of imagery. We have to get it back. We have to be able to know the information, but we have to be able to convert it to imagery. Rabbi Chanan Wasserman, Yisrael Salanta calls this musar that is tangible, that is emotional. If we are going to combat what's going on inside of us, which we cannot seem to control with words, we have to practice learning how to speak a different language. When you want to think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's influence in the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's power, you close your eyes and you imagine volcanoes. You close your eyes and you soar over redwood forests in California. Or you hover over the animal kingdom. You step back from this world and you think about the universe and the stars and the moon and the sun. Think of the sun. How powerful it is. Yet it's a creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You want to know how powerful HaKadosh Baruch Hu is relative to this person that's threatening you, relative to this situation that seems to be detrimental, and you're all closed up. Well, you can free yourself. You go outside. It's very hard. It's very hard to stand on the top of a mountain and look down at the world, right? And be depressed. And feel helpless. Why does it set you free when you... I remember in 2008 when the market was crashing, with days where I literally was going out of my mind. In Wall Street, none of the windows open in the buildings. There's a reason for that. I remember one day, I just couldn't take it anymore. I went outside and I walked into Central Park. It was a spring day. The birds were chirping, the trees were blooming. And I just looked outside and I looked around. I took a deep breath and I said, Marava Masecha Hashem. And I just completely, it all went away. Just in a second, it all went away. Now I can't always run to Central Park. But I can always run to Central Park. Because Central Park is here. The Baal Shem Tov tells us we are where our mind is, where our imagery is, where our thoughts are. We can daven standing in the Bet HaMikdash. We could daven standing at the Kotel. But we could be in this room. We can have our hand on the Kotel. In fact, the next time you go, record it. Record the wall, record the crevices. You probably don't even have to because you've done it so many times. You can do it the next time you pray. And you can be there with your power of imagination. So, hopefully we shared useful information. We touched upon the ideas that we would want to serve as a foundation of a life of tranquility and peace of mind. And we've introduced a language which could bring both heart and mind together so that the next time we're faced with a challenge, we can take a few deep breaths. We can free ourselves of the shackles of darkness, the imprisonment of anxiety, stress, and it only takes moments to free ourselves and to connect to the fact that Einod Milvado, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here infusing us and the world with life, and therefore we have absolutely nothing to worry about. Amen.
Rabbi,